welcome back to Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. Now, Conservative MP Miriam has called for a police investigation into the charity Mermaids, which supports transgender, non-binary and gender-diverse children and their families. She raised the issue to the Prime Minister at PMQs on Wednesday.
Mr. Speaker, over the past week, serious safeguarding failures by the children's charity Mermaids have come to light. Revelations that the charity sent breast-flattening devices to young girls behind their parents' back, promoted harmful medical and surgical procedures to children, hired a trustee with links to paedophile organisations, and a digital engagement manager who posted pornographic images online, including of himself dressed as a schoolgirl. For years, despite whistleblowers raising alarm, Mermaids have had unfettered access to vulnerable children. Does my right honourable friend agree that it has taken far too long for these concerns to be taken seriously? And does she also agree that it is high time for a police investigation into the activities of Mermaids and its staff?
It's very important that under 18s are able to develop their own decision-making capabilities and not be forced into any kind of activity. And what I would say on the subject of the investigation she raises, of course those matters should be raised and should be properly looked at.
Well said, well said. Mermaids, of course, dispute this and say it's extremely distressing that some MPs want to deny young trans people support and services without listening to their experiences. And Miriam joins me now. First of all, Miriam, thank you very much for raising that question. Can you tell our audience why you're concerned about Mermaids and think a police investigation is necessary?
Yes, certainly, and good afternoon. So Mermaids is a charity that have been set up to support trans and gender questioning children. Now, many would think that is a noble aim, but Mermaids themselves hold a very, very extreme position on sex and gender. So they promote the idea that you can have a gender identity that's different from your biological sex, that you can change that gender, that some children are born in the wrong body, that the right thing for some children to do is to go down a route of social transition, medical transition, surgical transition, to keep that secret from parents sometimes. And, you know, that is quite an extreme position for a children's charity to hold. And there have been some serious questions over Mermaids activity for some time. Whistleblowers have been calling into question the way they work for some years now, about how they separate children from parents, send breast binders to children, those kind of things. And over recent weeks, this has really come to a head. There have been some very good investigations in the Telegraph and the Times about the activities of Mermaid, and specifically the things that have come out about them sending these breast flattening devices to children behind their parents' back. Now, the Met Police on their website, they class breast flattening as child abuse. So that's, you know, clearly a big red flag. And then we've also got this kind of failure of safeguarding in the way that Mermaids have recruited some key staff. So a trustee with very obvious links to paedophile organisations that could be found by the members of the public just by a quick Google search, and this digital manager who posts pornographic images online, including of himself dressed as a schoolgirl. So at the very least, Mermaids has failed to deliver the kind of safer recruitment that you would expect a children's charity to deliver. And the fact that they are then able to access vulnerable children, whether that's online or by going to schools, I think raises some serious questions that should be investigated.
I mean, the safeguarding red flags are all over the place, aren't they? The fact that they're sending chest binders to children and not informing their parents, that's a massive one to begin with. But also they're promoting harmful medical and surgical procedures to children, aren't they? But some would question whether a child can even be trans. Is that not an extreme stance in and of itself?
I absolutely agree with you. And I think you just have to look at the statistics, again, to raise some enormous questions that we should be asking in our public debate. So over the last 10 years, there's been a 5,500% increase in the number of girls presenting at gender identity clinics. And 80% of teachers now say that there are trans-identified or gender-distressed children in their schools. And that's just the ones we know about. So if you think about that rise in terms of 10 years, just a decade, there are some huge questions to ask about what is really going on. And when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, it's very apparent that many of these children have other issues that are not being investigated or supported, and instead they're just being classified as trans. So, for example, I think autistic children are very much overrepresented in children with gender distress, children who are same-sex attracted. impacted. Children who are vulnerable for other reasons because perhaps they've experienced abuse or got other vulnerabilities. And instead, charities like Mermaids and others, there are others, are saying to these children, no, we're going to push you down this route of transition. You know, all your distress, all your teenage angst can be explained by the fact that you're not actually a boy, you're a girl instead, and we'll help you to go down that path. Now, again, that is absolutely not a way to treat vulnerable children, and yet it's gone under the radar for so long. So I'm very glad that it's starting to come out to the open.
And thank you for raising it. It is such an important issue. We'll go into it in more depth at 3 o'clock. But before I let you go, I do want to ask really quickly, can the police investigate this if the police are conflicted because they've received training from Mermaids?
Yes, I've seen that story about West Yorkshire Police paying Mermaids for training, and that is extremely concerning. And again, there was a very good piece in the Telegraph about that a couple of days ago. But I think my understanding is that the Charity Commission is currently investigating Mermaids in terms of compliance, and we'll have to see where that goes and what they discover and whether or not they're able to refer to the police.
Okay, Miriam Cates, thank you for raising the issue and thank you for spending your Sunday with us. God bless. A spokesperson for the charity
gluing themselves to the road.
Now, many would think that, so for example,
a young person with a binder and comprehensive safety guidelines from an experienced member of staff is preferable to the likely alternative of unsafe practice. A spokesperson for the charity Mermaids sent us this statement. Our critics seem to have a problem accepting that trans people exist. No, trans children. They do, which means that young trans people also exist, and it is these people which Mermaids exists to help. It is extremely distressing that some MPs want to deny them support and services without listening to their experiences. There has been much inaccurate comment about chest binders. Our position is that providing a young person with a binder and comprehensive safety guidelines from an experienced member of staff is preferable to the likely alternative of unsafe practices and or continued or increasing dysphoria. As for puberty blockers, they are an internationally recognised safe reversible healthcare option and have been recommended by medical authorities in the UK and internationally for decades. You are with GB News, online, TV and on radio.